The NIL, the idea was that it got payers played, but we didn't know. And I love I'm not a Kobe Bryant fan and I don't like the Denver stuff, but I love what Kobe Bryant said. He said, I don't have all the answers. I don't even have all the questions. We didn't know the question. So the question now is what, Caleb, as we learn more about NIL and what would now be year 4, coming into year 4?
This is 2024 is going to be the third recruiting class, the third signing day after NIL went into effect. It went into effect July 1st, 2021. Okay, so the 2021 recruiting class doesn't count. Yes.
Okay.
As of right now, the top 10 players on 247 Sports Composite, 8 different schools have a commitment from a top 10 player on 247 Sports Composite. It was 7 each of the previous 2 years. That's all in an NIL era. In the pre-NIL era, it was 6 in 2021, 5 in 2020, and 5 in 2019. Now that seems minimal, 6 to 7 and 5 to 8, but that it's consistently the last 3 years been more than the previous 3 years suggests that NIL is developing more parity. There's a catch. But if I go beyond 3 years, there were multiple times in the 10 years before that where you had 9 or 10 schools, different schools have top 10 players. I think NIL saved college football from losing its parity because I think the SEC was getting so dominant by the late 2010s that only a handful of schools were getting a lot of talent. And I think the NIL is actually bringing college football. People are seeing it's bringing more parity. I think it's just bringing college football kind of back to where it was before Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State got every single recruit in the world.
Well, I don't see how it could possibly. At the end of the day, what's it all about, Caleb? At the end of the day, life,
money.
Life. For most people, it's about money. Okay, so like if you won one of your parlays and you brought home $2 million on a weekend, I imagine the Dave Hooker show with Caleb Calhoun would need retooling because you might have other things that you want to do with your life. Okay, so I mean, I hope that wouldn't be the case. I actually, if I won the lottery, would still do the show. My wife and I talked about it when I'm never going to retire. I love what Howard Stern's doing at 70 years old, where he's interviewing like old rock bands. I mean, this will evolve into something until the day I die, or I'm incapable of doing it. But for the most people, it's about money. So how can NIL achieve parity when everybody doesn't have the same amount of money? I mean, there's no that equates itself. So it can't really achieve parity, which I think is what you were saying in a different sort of way, because the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Tennessees, the Texases, they have more money than the Mississippi states and the Oregon states and the Washington states. So really, it's done the opposite of create more parity. It's been fairer for players who get stuck 2 years behind a guy and can't play, especially at the quarterback position. And that's great. But really what's happened is those programs that may have seen a dip in their quarterback play have gone out and gotten other quarterbacks. And it's made them better programs. So maybe if you want to talk about the top 25 programs, it makes it a little bit more parity there, maybe. But what it's really doing, and we're in the middle of this, we haven't seen it yet, it's going to leave some programs in the dust. And it is like the Washington State and the Oregon States. They're not even in the conference anymore, Caleb. So, I mean, they are, but they're not. So, to me, it's actually resulted in less parity, far less parity.
Well, okay, it depends on what you mean by parity. It's going to leave it. There will be, here, put it this way. There will be more people, more programs able to have a big piece of eat at the big kids table. There will be more programs able to eat at the big kids table, but there will be no little kids table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great.
So
great analogy.
Yeah. And so the thing with NIL that's interesting is this. The reason it brings more parity among the upper echelon schools than it used to is because, Dave, let's just be honest. There was no parity in college sports before NIL. Okay, the schools with the most resources always got the best recruits. Nick Saban used to complain like NIL will hurt parity. You're in Alabama getting a number 1 recruiting class every year. What are you talking about? There's not enough parity. Obviously, there's like So the point with NIL was, I think what NIL's done, here's what it is, and you're somebody who's covered recruiting. You never have parity in college football. You're never gonna have the NFL ever. That's never gonna happen in college football. But you can make teams a little bit closer to each other. The number one thing that makes them closer to each other, Dave, is if the number of factors that go into recruiting increases. So there's location, school resources, conference, playing time. Now there's NIL. Now that just happens to be the biggest factor in recruiting. I mean, that just happens to overtake every other factor we've named. But the sheer volume of factors in recruiting is naturally going to increase the number of schools that can have a seat at the table. And so NIL is a big one.
Excuse me, I choked up. I don't have time to post another poll, but because I'm engaged with this conversation, but I do want you to tell me on the message board. Do you really want parity? Because the NFL they've strived for that. Professional leagues strive for that. That's why they have salary caps. That's why they have inverted draft selections based off records. And we have
Socialism.
seen what's that?
It's literal communism. I mean, the NFL is literally communism.
And do we like that, or did we like it better that the Patriots were dominating? Now they were doing so in a time that they were trying to get parity. The NFL was, but in the end, what happened? A guy named Tom Brady was so special that he dominated. So what do we want? Because let's face it, guys. I know a lot of you are Tennessee fans, and we've got a lot of fans from other schools. Probably you hated Alabama dominating, but that was one great narrative, was it not? When Georgia finally beat Alabama for a championship, that was a great narrative. Could anybody, could any former Saban assistant ever beat him? That was a great narrative. So do we really want it, or do we think we want it?
We want it because you're missing. There's two narratives in the NFL. And this is what's real big about the NFL. Yes, there's the narrative, can anybody knock off Tom Brady? But the other narrative was, and this is where it was different from college football. You could look at your team, and no matter how bad you were, you could say, next year, if we get some good free agents and things bounce our way, we could win the Super Bowl. You're never more than a year out from winning the Super Bowl if you're an NFL team. Dave, when Josh Heupel if you were following Tennessee in 2019, did you think, Tennessee could beat Alabama in 2020? No, you didn't think that, and nobody thought it. Okay, so the concept of parity from the NFL perspective, yes, the Patriots were a villain, but there were so many other teams in that time that were winning Super Bowls at the same time. College football's problem was borderline the NBA's problem. Remember the NBA? I mean, for as long as you've been watching the NBA, Dave, has there ever been more than 2 or 3 teams that could win the finals in any year?
No, but they've been different year to year, so I'm not following your thinking.
I mean,
Giannis Antetokounmpo. Nobody talked about the Bucks before Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Right,
I think we need to stick with football because one basketball player can make a monstrous difference. Personally,
okay, but what I mean is this parity. But that was college football was so loading up with talent. 2 years ago, Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia, you could bet them versus the field. You should never be at a point where you could bet 3 teams versus the entire field to win a championship. Ever. That's ridiculous. And you couldn't do that with the NFL. Even when the Patriots were at their peak, you couldn't bet the Patriots and 2 other teams versus the field. You could never do that.
Okay, I came up during a time where the NFC East dominated. Now, when I became a Cowboys fan, and people call me a front-running fan, I'm really not. The Cowboys were awful when I started rooting for them. They had a quarterback named Danny White that was hella bad. And but the NFC East dominated with the Giants, the Redskins, and the Cowboys and the Eagles. The Eagles didn't win a championship, but they were very dominant. So it was kind of fun. That was the narrative back then. Can anybody topple the best team in the NFC East? So that was kind of fun. So I'm going to break with you on that. I'm okay with having 3 or 4 teams. I'm actually okay with the narrative of having one dynasty. I think that
numbers don't support your argument, though.
Okay, well, I could be wrong, but that's the way I feel. I think you're starting to see Patrick Mahomes create that Patriots-like dynasty where there's no in between. You either hate him or you love him. And
Patrick Mahomes is. Sorry.
Go ahead. I think that's a good narrative.
Patrick Mahomes is a unique. Here's what we're watching that's so rare with Patrick Mahomes. So with Peyton Manning, when Tom Brady was having a dynasty, in the regular season, you would still say maybe Peyton Manning was better, Aaron Rodgers was better, something like that. But Tom Brady would get the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes is the first player that we've ever watched at quarterback in the NFL to be the best player in the regular season year in and year out and have a dynasty going.
Well,
and
true.
We've
but
never seen that.
That can't happen in college football. I guess what I'm asking you is if you entered the season and you said, I would take Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee over the field. But the next year you'd say, I would take Ohio State, Michigan, Southern Cal against the field. To me, that is parity.
Yeah, but
unless they're the same three programs every year.
Right, but you just brought it up. It was the same few programs in the NFC East. So as a Cowboy fan, you had fun with it. How did every other fan base feel that wasn't in the NFC East, though, Dave?
Well, no. I thought it was cool, even when the Cowboys were 3-13 and 1-15, and the Giants and Redskins were dominant. I hated it, but it was cool. I don't know how to explain that really.
Let me bring it down this way, actually, because it was when you were covering Tennessee. There was about a 10-year period from I'd say 93 to 2002, where the betting was Tennessee and Florida versus the field to win the SEC, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, there was a lot of apathy among a lot of SEC schools during that time. The SEC is much better now because so many other teams have these expectations. Tennessee and Florida ran roughshod over the SEC, and it was bad for the conference. Now, Tennessee fans loved it. Y'all are going to hate me for saying it. Florida fans loved it, but it wasn't great for the SEC when Tennessee and Florida were the only two teams that mattered in the league. And there was a period where they were literally the only two teams that were worthy of national attention from the SEC.